They called him a machine back then, but machines don't bleed and they sure as hell don't cry. The moment Sylvester Stallone stepped into the convention hall in Las Vegas, something shifted in the air. It was supposed to be just another nostalgic tribute, a reunion of icons, cosplayers, collectors, and a ceremonial over-the-top arm wrestling match to honor the 40th anniversary of Over the Top, the 1987 cult classic that had become far more than a film for many. It was a movement, a symbol, a rhythm of grit set to the click of a trucker's gear shift and the echo of heavy breathing before the slam of a hand on steel. But for Stallone, it wasn't just a celebration. It was a reckoning. He hadn't seen him in 40 years, hadn't even heard his name spoken aloud in decades, the man who had doubled for him in the final match, the man who had taken a fall that was never part of the choreography, the man who, rumor had it, nearly lost his right arm for real. They never talked after that shoot. Too much was left unsaid, and Hollywood moved fast. Too fast for apologies, too fast for second chances. The hall smelled of sweat and vinyl and cheap leather jackets. The floor trembled under the beat of Survivor and Kenny Loggins blasting from a retro DJ booth. Between plastic lunchboxes and replica hawk caps, fans were reenacting iconic moments like they were sacred rites. Old VHS copies of the movie were stacked in pyramids. Somewhere near the back, someone was screening the final scene on a loop. It was surreal, like walking into a memory Stallone wasn't sure he even owned anymore. He adjusted his sunglasses, even though they were indoors. Habit, protection. He smiled for the crowd, but there was tension behind it. A stiffness in the jaw, a hesitation in the corners of his mouth. The announcer's voice rang out over the speaker system. And now, folks, for the main event of the evening, a surprise guest, an icon, a man who defined an era, Mr. Sylvester Stallone. Applause thundered. People stood. Phones rose like flags in a battlefield. Stallone gave a half wave and walked toward the stage. He didn't know who his opponent would be. They'd told him it would be someone special. They hadn't said how. Backstage, just beyond the curtain, a man stood silent in the shadows. He was older now, face carved deep with lines, eyes hard with distance. His right hand was wrapped in black tape, not because of injury, not anymore, but because of memory. Rick Donovan. Back in '87, he was just another stunt guy. The one who took the hits when the camera couldn't catch Sly's face. The one who trained for months to mimic his moves perfectly. The one who volunteered, no, insisted, on doing that last dangerous flip over the table. It was supposed to look real. It became too real. His arm had shattered on impact, a compound fracture, hours of surgery, months of rehab, career over, and no call from Sly. Not a letter, not a word, nothing. He didn't come to the event for revenge, he came for closure. But Stallone didn't know this. He approached the stage with a performer's grace, playing to the crowd, but carrying something heavier beneath the showmanship, a weight he never admitted to in interviews. The truth was, he had tried to reach out, years ago. But by then, Rick had disappeared from the circuit, changed his number, left LA. Therefore, he accepted this mysterious surprise match with a gut feeling that someone was waiting behind it. The MC leaned in. "Your opponent's already at the table, Sly. Go ahead." The lights dimmed. A single spotlight hit the wrestling table at the center of the stage. 2 chairs. One man already seated, arm propped, black tape across the wrist. Stallone squinted, then stopped walking. His breath hitched. That profile, that scar on the right cheek, that silence. It wasn't a fan. It wasn't a bodybuilder. It wasn't some Instagram influencer looking for a viral clip. It was him. It was Rick. The crowd had no idea. They just cheered louder, thinking it was all part of the show. Stallone stood frozen for a beat too long, then moved forward, slowly, like walking through fog. He sat. Rick didn't say a word. Neither did Stallone. Their elbows locked. Their hands met. The ref gave a countdown. 3. Stallone tightened his grip. 2. Rick flared his nostrils. 1. And in that instant, before the referee said go, Stallone whispered, "I'm sorry." The bell rang. The match was real, not rehearsed, not staged, raw. Rick went hard, and Sly answered with equal force. Wrinkles clenched over sinew, breath short, muscles screamed in resistance. The audience roared, but it was background noise now, just white static. This wasn't about winning. This was about everything they hadn't said, everything they hadn't faced. Flashback, 1987, Soundstage 12, final day of shooting. The scene was behind schedule. Stallone was exhausted. The director wanted one more take. Rick stepped in. "Let me try something," he said. "It'll look more brutal." He didn't wait for a second opinion. He charged the table, flipped, landed wrong. Snap, blood, gasps. Stallone, watching from off-camera, dropped his water bottle. The sound of it hitting the floor was louder in his memory than the crack of Rick's bone. Back to present. Their hands trembled under the pressure. Not from pain, but from restraint. Stallone was holding back. So was Rick. Then, suddenly, Rick let go. His hand opened. The match ended. The ref blinked, confused, called it a draw. Rick leaned in, finally speaking. "That's all I ever needed, man." And he stood up. The crowd erupted, thinking it was part of the act. But backstage, Stallone followed. "Rick, wait." Rick turned. Silence again. Then Stallone did something no one expected. He took off his cap and bowed his head. For just a second, it wasn't a performance. It was a man acknowledging another man who had been erased from the real. But that wasn't the end. Therefore, when the lights came back on and the MC tried to reset the show, Stallone walked back to the mic. He cleared his throat. "There's someone in this room who never got his moment, who took a real hit so I could stay standing. You didn't know his name, but you should." He gestured to Rick, who stood awkwardly by the curtain. "Rick Donovan, the real damn champion." Gasps, applause. Some people cried. The camera zoomed in on Rick's face. He smiled. For the first time in a long time. Backstage after the event, a young filmmaker approached Rick. "Mr. Donovan," she said, "if you're not busy, I'm directing a movie about unsung heroes in cinema, and I'd like you to star in it." Rick blinked, then looked past her, towards Stallone, who gave him a small nod. It wasn't over, it was just beginning. Sometimes the punch that breaks you doesn't come from the outside. Rick Donovan hadn't been on a film set in 36 years. The last time he was, he'd left in an ambulance, his arm dangling by torn sinew and surgical tape. The crew had frozen. The director kept rolling. And somewhere in the background, he'd heard someone yell, "We'll fix it in post." That phrase echoed in his dreams for years, but tonight, something cracked open. Not his bones, his silence. They sat together in the green room after the crowd had cleared. No cameras, no stage lights. Just two folding chairs, a half-drunk bottle of water, and the hum of an old vending machine clunking behind them. Stallone looked older now, sure, but the shoulders were still carved like stone. His eyes, though, they held a new weight, a quiet sort of pain that didn't need dialogue. Rick was the first to speak. "You didn't owe me that, you know." Stallone didn't look at him. "Yeah," he said. "I did." Flashback, 1988, 1 year after the release of Over the Top. The film had found its audience, late-night reruns and truck stops pumping it on VHS players, sweaty teenage boys mimicking the backward hat maneuver like it was a sacred ritual. Rick, meanwhile, was at home in a small rehab clinic in Flagstaff, Arizona. Arm in a sling, bills piling up, letters unopened. One of those letters had Stallone's return address. He never opened it. Back to present. "I tried reaching out," Stallone said. "You were gone." "I was tired," Rick replied. "Of pain. Of everyone looking at me like I was some cautionary tale. And you were everywhere. Posters, premieres. I couldn't open a gas station bathroom without seeing your face. Stallone nodded, slowly. I get that. A beat. Rick looked over. Do you? Sly exhaled. More than you know. But reconciliation is never clean. Therefore, the next morning, when Stallone offered to bring Rick with him to a studio meeting, a chance to pitch the idea of a short film honoring forgotten stuntmen, Rick hesitated. I don't want your charity, Rick said sharply. It's not charity, Sly replied. It's a start. I don't trust starts anymore. The young filmmaker from the night before, Maya Green, 31, documentary director with a sharp eye and sharper questions, was already waiting outside the lobby with a camera strapped to her shoulder and an old-school boom mic tucked under her arm like a sword. She didn't see a broken man. She saw a story. Mr. Donovan, she said, you've been invisible for decades. I want to change that. Rick gave her a long, unreadable look. Then, what's your angle? No angle. Just truth. Rick scoffed. Truth doesn't sell. Stallone interrupted gently. Sometimes it does, if you hit the right nerve. The meeting didn't go as planned. Inside the studio boardroom, a dozen executives in sleek blazers and tight smiles listened politely as Maya pitched her docuseries idea. Stallone stood by her side like a battle-worn general endorsing a new recruit. But the energy shifted when Rick walked in. Whispers, raised brows. The head of development, a young exec barely old enough to remember the original film, leaned forward with folded hands. I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan, he said, but we're really leaning toward younger talent these days. Short-form content, fast pace, TikTok style. Rick chuckled under his breath. You want me to do a backflip in 15 seconds? Awkward silence. Look, the exec continued, we appreciate your contribution to the industry truly, but this just isn't commercial enough. But Maya wasn't done. She slammed her laptop closed. I've got 2.3 million followers who disagree. Now that got their attention. Stallone grinned. Rick blinked. You do? Maya nodded. They're not just fans, they're angry at how stunt people, body doubles, behind-the-scenes legends, get tossed aside once the credits roll. She turned to Rick. You're not a relic. You're a reminder. Outside, Rick lit a cigarette with a hand that still trembled sometimes. Stallone joined him. You okay? Sly asked. Rick exhaled smoke through his nose. You ever feel like you died, but just kept walking around because no one told you? Stallone nodded. Every time I watch a scene where I'm smiling but my head was a mess. Rick flicked the ash. How do you fix that? Sly looked at him. You don't. You use it. That night they went to dinner. Not at some 5-star steakhouse in the Strip. At a dusty diner 2 blocks from where Rick used to live. The waitress recognized Stallone instantly, froze mid-order. Rick gave her a wink. He gets nervous around pie. They laughed. The first real laugh between them in 40 years. At 2 a.m., Rick got a phone call. It wasn't from Maya. It was from Barry Klein, the assistant director from the original Over the Top set. He was dying. Liver failure. They told me you were in town, Barry croaked through the line. And I've been waiting to say something. Rick sat up, eyes wide. What? Barry hesitated. Then, I'm the reason the fall happened. Rick froze. What? I told the camera op to keep rolling. I told the crew to ignore the safety adjustment. We were behind schedule. It's on me. Rick's hand shook. Why now? Barry coughed. Because some pain needs a witness. I thought it was yours alone. But I carried it too. The line went dead. Rick didn't sleep that night. The next morning he knocked on Stallone's hotel room. Change of plans, he said. Sly rubbed his eyes. Yeah? Rick smirked. Let's make a damn movie. Maya sets up her first interview. A close-up shot of Rick, framed against the warm afternoon sun. She asks the first question. What do you want people to remember about you? Rick stares at the camera, then slowly says, that I showed up, even when no one saw me. You can lift your arm, you can lift your voice, but lifting your past, that's the real weight. Rick Donovan had never been more visible, and it terrified him. The first teaser for Maya Green's documentary dropped 2 weeks after the Vegas event. It was raw, gritty, and honest. A 1-minute montage of stuntmen, old crash pads, cracked helmets, and grainy behind-the-scenes footage from the golden age of action films. But the last frame hit harder than any staged fall. It was a close-up of Rick's battered right hand, resting on a table, knuckles swollen and scarred. Not all heroes wore capes, some wore casts. The clip went viral overnight. Trending hashtags flooded Twitter and Instagram. Justice for stuntmen. Remember Rick, real heroes of Hollywood. At first, Rick didn't know how to feel. Pride, guilt, fear. He paced the tiny apartment he was renting month to month, chain-smoking cigarettes and ignoring the dozens of interview requests piling up in his inbox. He wasn't ready to be a hero, especially not when he still felt like a ghost. But fame, real or accidental, doesn't wait for readiness. Therefore, the spotlight kept growing. Maya fielded calls from Netflix, Hulu, and even HBO, all vying for the rights to distribute the documentary before it was even finished. She fought to keep it indie. Rick's story isn't for sale, she told them. It's for remembering. That only made her a bigger target. The sharks started circling. Old Hollywood doesn't like being reminded of its skeletons. Quietly, at first, whispers in executive offices, angry emails to festival organizers, powerful people began trying to shut the project down. Anonymous threats, disinvited appearances, rumors that Rick was a difficult personality, a washed-up liability, even accusations that his injury had been his own fault due to recklessness. It was gaslighting at a grand scale. Rewrite the past, protect the brand. Rick knew the tactics. He just never thought he'd live to see them aimed at him. One night, Stallone showed up at Rick's door with 2 things, a 6-pack of beer and a battered manila envelope. "Got something you need to see," he said. Inside the envelope were copies of the original call sheets from Over the Top, schedules, injury reports, incident logs. Buried in the paperwork was an internal memo from the production company. Proceed with filming despite risk. No official acknowledgement of on-set injury unless necessary. Rick stared at it. Proof. It wasn't just bad luck. It was negligence. But proof didn't equal peace. Therefore, Rick faced a brutal choice. Maya wanted to include the documents in the final cut of the documentary, to name names, show receipts, and force an overdue reckoning. Rick hesitated. "It'll burn bridges," Stallone warned him. "Not just theirs, yours too. People you worked with, people who stood by you, even in silence." Rick nodded. He wasn't naive. If he spoke out, he would torch what little goodwill he still had in the industry. If he stayed quiet, he'd betray the truth. And himself. Flashback, 1991. Rick working odd jobs on TV sets, never again as a stuntman. Craft services, security, even janitorial work sometimes. Passing posters of Stallone, Schwarzenegger, Willis, men he once shadowed, now gods in marble. He would lower his head and keep walking. Never complain, never explain. Until now. The Las Vegas Film Festival announced that Maya's documentary, titled Unsung, would premiere as a centerpiece screening. The studio Rick and Stallone had met with earlier tried to pull strings to block it. They failed. But the night before the premiere, Rick received an invitation he didn't expect. A private dinner hosted by some of the biggest living legends of the stunt world. Men and women he had once bled alongside, fought alongside, laughed alongside. People he thought had forgotten him. Rick entered the small banquet hall cautiously. Faces turned, some smiled, some didn't. At the head table sat Tommy Crash McNeil, a legend who had doubled for John Wayne in the late 60s. He stood up slowly, cane in hand, knees stiff, and opened his arms. Rick hesitated, then crossed the room. The hug was firm, real. "You carried a lot of weight for a lot of years," Tommy said. Maybe it's time we helped carry it too. But not everyone was supportive. Therefore, halfway through the dinner, another voice broke the camaraderie. Cal Barnes, a former stunt coordinator turned studio consultant, slammed his drink down. "You gonna air out our dirty laundry for a cheap applause?" he barked. "You think you're a hero? You're a cautionary tale, Rick. Always were." The room tensed. Rick's fists clenched under the table. Then Stallone's voice cut through, calm but razor sharp. "He's not a hero because he fell. He's a hero because he got back up." Silence. Rick didn't respond. He didn't need to. On the night of the premiere, Rick made a last-minute decision. He met Maya backstage, minutes before the lights dimmed. "Cut the documents," he said. Maya froze. "What?" "Rick, this is your story. It's bigger than that," he said. "I'm not here to punish. I'm here to remember." Maya stared at him, understanding, but heartbroken. "Promise me you'll still tell it all," he said. "The pain, the cost, the courage." She nodded. He smiled. A real, open, unguarded smile. "Good, then let's roll." Unsung didn't open with scandal. It opened with laughter. Clips of battered, bloodied stunt performers grinning into camera lenses. Outtakes of failed jumps, broken props, missed marks. Then, slowly, the tone shifted. Images of bruised ribs, shattered helmets, casts scrawled with signatures. Rick's voice narrated over the footage. "You don't jump for the fame. You don't fall for the glory. You do it because it's in your blood. Because sometimes, flying for a second is worth breaking for a lifetime." The audience sat in stunned silence as the credits rolled. Then, a standing ovation. Rick sat quietly in the dark, head bowed, tears slipping silently down his weathered cheeks. Stallone leaned over. "You did it, Hawk." Rick chuckled hoarsely. "I'm not Hawk." Sly grinned. "Yeah, you're better." After the festival, Rick stood alone outside the venue. The desert night was cool, stars smeared across the sky like spilled salt. Maya approached. "Offers are coming in already," she said. "Interviews, panels, maybe even an award season run." Rick shook his head, bemused. "I didn't even get a trophy when I shattered my arm." Maya smiled. "Maybe now you'll get something better." Rick raised an eyebrow. "Yeah? Like what?" She shrugged. "Your name back." He looked up at the stars, and for the first time in decades he wasn't looking back. He was looking forward. The fall wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything that mattered. The weeks after the festival felt like a strange dream. Rick Donovan, a name that once disappeared from call sheets and crew lunches, was now trending across every entertainment headline in America. But fame is a strange echo. Therefore, Rick found himself pulled between invitations and interviews, podcasts and panels, and, most unexpectedly, an honorary award ceremony at the Academy itself. Not for acting, not for writing, but for something purer. Lifetime achievement in stunt coordination and legacy. It wasn't the Oscar stage, but it was his stage, and that made all the difference. Maya helped him rent a tux. Stallone helped him practice his speech. Or at least tried. "You sure you want to wing it?" Sly teased as Rick stared blankly at an index card. Rick shrugged. "I've been falling my whole life without a script. Might as well land this one my way." Sly laughed, deep and genuine. "You know what?" he said. "That's the real performance. The big night." The Dolby Theater gleamed under stage lights. Gold statues shone like stars caught in mid-dance. And in a modest section, seated between legends and newcomers alike, Rick sat with his palms sweating through the fabric of his rented tux. When his name was called, he stood slowly. Not with swagger, not with shame, just honestly. The room clapped, real clapping. No pity applause, no obligation. Recognition. The presenter, Maya, hands trembling only slightly, handed him the plaque. And the microphone. Rick squinted under the lights, cleared his throat, and spoke. Rick's speech. I used to think you had to win to be seen, had to cross the finish line first, had to land clean, had to look perfect when you hit the ground. I thought falling was failure, and for a long time, I let that thought kill parts of me that deserved better. But the truth is, he paused, looked out across the sea of faces, young, old, famous, forgotten. Falling isn't failure, not getting back up. That's failure. And even when you don't get back up the way you used to, even when it's slower, shakier, a little uglier, it still counts. He smiled then, small but unbreakable. I'm not the fastest, I'm not the strongest, I'm not even the best, but I showed up, and tonight, so did you. Thank you for seeing us, finally, for seeing all of us. The applause was thunderous, genuine, a standing ovation. But Rick's journey wasn't just about awards. Therefore, after the ceremony, he made one more stop. The hospice was quiet, sterile air, faint beeping from distant machines. Barry Klein, the assistant director who had once prioritized speed over safety, lay frail and faded against white bedsheets. Rick sat beside him. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Barry rasped, "Was it worth it?" Rick thought about it, about the years lost, the pain, the bitterness, and then about Maya's film, the applause, the hug from Tommy Crash, the look in Stallone's eyes. He nodded. Yeah, it was. Barry closed his eyes and smiled. A tear slid down his weathered face. It was enough. Maybe forgiveness didn't need a parade. Maybe sometimes it just needed to be witnessed. A few weeks later, Rick returned to Las Vegas, not for a convention, not for a premiere, for a charity event. A new foundation had been formed, the Donovan Initiative, providing healthcare and financial support to retired stunt performers who had been injured and forgotten. At the entrance, a giant banner rippled in the desert wind. Because heroes deserve more than applause, they deserve care. Rick stood by the entrance, greeting old friends, faces he hadn't seen in decades, each carrying their own invisible scars. Stallone arrived late, sunglasses on, a wide grin splitting his face. "Thought you might need a little muscle to handle the crowd," he joked. Rick laughed. "No more arm wrestling contests," he said. "My ego's still recovering." Sly clapped him on the back. "Brother, your ego's the strongest damn thing in this room." As the sun set over the desert skyline, Rick sat on a low wall outside the venue. Maya joined him, 2 sodas in hand. They watched the horizon together, oranges and pinks bleeding into twilight. "You think we made a difference?" she asked. Rick didn't answer right away. Instead, he pulled something from his jacket. It was the original call sheet from Over the Top, the one Stallone had given him, now framed, not hidden away in a drawer. He set it beside him. A reminder. A scar made sacred. Finally, he said, "Yeah, we didn't change the past, but we changed what it means." As the stars blinked into existence above them, Rick thought back to that moment decades ago, lying on a cold soundstage floor, pain flooding every nerve, feeling invisible and small. He wasn't invisible anymore, and he wasn't small. He was human, flawed, broken, standing, and somewhere deep inside him a voice, young, stubborn, reckless, whispered, "Get back up." And he did. One last time. Because falling wasn't failure. It never was. Thank you so much for watching. Your time means everything to us, and we hope this story moved you as much as it moved us. If it did, please consider leaving a comment, sharing the video, and subscribing to the channel. Because powerful stories deserve to be heard. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never underestimate the impact of one small act of courage.